All right, let's talk about multiple choice. So the OSSLT is a very long test, and there are a lot of multiple choice questions on it. So I'm going to go through the different types of multiple choice questions and the different types of readings that they pair with, and then talk about a few strategies for how to answer those questions. So although the test length and format does change from year to year, this is a general breakdown so you can see an approximate weighting of how many multiple choice there are in relation to how many short answer and longer writing tasks. One of the things to note is that not everybody gets the same test. So some of you are going to get what they call field questions, where you will have a reading that they are just testing out to see if it makes sense and if the questions make sense. And what that means is that when you leave for your break, somebody might say, oh, did you read that article on polar bears? It was so confusing. And you might think, I didn't read anything about polar bears. I read about licorice. Oh my goodness, what did I do? I did the wrong test. Oh my gosh. And don't be fooled. Don't be stressed, because some of you are going to get different versions of the test, and some of the readings won't end up counting in your mark. Another thing is that if when they mark the test, they see that, oh, on reading number 2, everybody was confused with these 2 questions, they might actually take those questions out of the overall average. So that's why it can be a little bit confusing if you are used to looking over a test and kind of estimating how many you got right, how many you got wrong, trying to figure out what you think you might have got on it. It really doesn't work for this test because everything is kind of oddly calculated and oddly weighted. And even though the average test is done with 81 marks, you're going to get a score that's going to come back, and a 300 out of 400 is a passing mark. So it's very hard to kind of guesstimate how you did on the test. So just do your best and use these strategies, and you'll be okay. Another thing to know about the test, when it's written in hard copy, we are possibly moving to online formats, but when it's written in hard copy, we have 2 booklets. We have a question booklet and an answer booklet. So the question booklet is there to present you with all the tasks, but your work is recorded in the answer booklet, and that's both multiple choice as well as the written tasks. So just make sure that you always read the instructions and put your answers in the correct place. All right, different types of readings. This is the general format for the test, and again, they are always changing things, but these are the types of different readings that you might be asked to do. Generally, there are 2 books. In the first book, you'll have several short answer questions as well as a longer writing piece that usually comes towards the end of the book. And in book 2, you have a longer writing piece that looks a little bit like an essay. It's a series of opinion paragraphs, and it usually starts the book, and then a few short answer. And then the rest of the test is all based on multiple choice. Some of the readings you'll be doing multiple choice and a short answer. So they're really looking for your reading comprehension in those sections. In other sections of the book, it might be just multiple choice. So here are some samples of the different types of reading. So generally the test will start with a news article. So a nonfiction text that's written like a news article, and they will be asking you to interpret specific details from it. There'll be 2 grammar sections, 1 in each book. And generally they give you something like this. So they'll give you a collection of sentences and ask you maybe to put them in order, or ask you what kind of punctuation is missing, or they'll ask you what's the purpose of a comma. So these are questions you can't really prepare for, and I would just use your multiple choice strategies that I'm going to go over when you're answering these questions, because even if you don't know the specific grammatical rule, if you follow the multiple choice strategies, generally you can do pretty good on these questions. There's also a nonfiction story, so it's generally a story about real people, not written necessarily like a news article, maybe more like a profile or something you might see on a blog. It also often tends to be about somebody's career path. So it's like a story, it'll give you a series of events, it'll tell you how somebody came to doing whatever exceptional thing they're talking about. There is a fiction story, and usually it is dialogue. So it's 2 or more characters speaking. And one of the things that they always try to make sure that you understand is who is actually speaking. So that's one of those times to really use your highlighter and write notes and make sure that you can tell the difference between which character is saying what. The graphic text is a whole other reading strategy that I've got some tutorials on for you, but this is what the graphic text will look like. And the graphic text is always paired with multiple choice questions. And then they will also give you an information paragraph. This is similar to what you might see in a textbook. So it will tell you about something like this article, ice sculpting, a sport. It would tell you about an animal. It would tell you about a particular scientific concept or a historical event. So again, it's the kind of writing that you see in a textbook. And so again, making notes, underlining, those are your top strategies for this type of reading. Okay, so beyond the different types of readings, all of the multiple choice questions can also be broken down into specific types of questions. So there is always what we call a directly stated question. So that means they're asking something like, in paragraph 5, what does Jim say to Sally? It's the kind of question that you can actually find the exact answer by going back and rereading that section. So it's testing reading comprehension, but it's something that if you pay attention to your reading, it should be one of the easier kinds of questions. Another type of question that they ask, and this can be hard depending on how confident you are in your language, it's called background knowledge. So this is where they might ask for something like the definition of a word, or they might ask for an understanding of a particular concept. But even if you don't necessarily know the definition of that word, or you haven't learned that concept in school yet, there's some tricks you can use in how you read the multiple choice questions that can help you with that. They always have some vocabulary questions. They always have you look at quotations and try to interpret them. So that's one of the things that we do when we study stories and novels in our ESL and English classes. And they always have grammar questions, but usually those sections are separate. The other type of question, which is the harder type, is called an inference. So I got this picture here because this is the way that I teach my grade 12 English students to remember what an inference is. An inference is an assumption or a guess that you can back up with proof. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to be able to read the question and find the exact answer in the reading. It's the kind of question that by combining your understanding of what you've read in the article already with some evidence of other things that the characters say or do, or the other kinds of facts that you're told, you can make an assumption. You can make an interpretation. So the ones where you have to analyze a quotation are often inference questions. So for example, we make inferences all the time. If you see somebody, let's say on the subway, and this is what that person's hand looks like, some inferences I could make are that this person is married because this person is wearing a ring on a specific finger, and that is the finger that culturally somebody puts a ring on if they are engaged or married. The fact that this person is wearing what looks to me like 2 rings tells me that they're married rather than engaged. So I could be wrong, right? This could be just an engagement ring. They could be wearing this ring for a different reason. Perhaps they want people to think that they're attached to somebody so that people don't bother them or don't pay attention to them. So it's not an absolute. It could be that this is the only finger that that ring fits on. I might be wrong. That's why we call it an educated guess or an assumption with evidence. An inference means I could be wrong, but I have basis in my background knowledge or my cultural understanding or in my reading of the story to back up my answer. So that's what an inference is. All right, so here are the top strategies for doing multiple choice questions. And this applies to the OSSLT, but this also applies to any multiple choice tests that you're taking throughout high school or university, and you will take many of them. So for the OSSLT, I highly recommend that you read the questions before you do the reading. Although this doesn't always work, and you might have teachers in your classes who would say, never do this. Because the OSSLT is such a long test, and it's easy to get tired, and it's easy to become what we call waste of time readers. So when we read, there's kind of 2 voices that can happen in your head. One is active reading, where you're reading everything, understanding it, and remembering it. And the other is your waste of time voice or waste of time reading. So your mind wanders. You start paying attention to the student beside you who's clicking their pen too loudly. Another teacher comes in the room and comes to collect attendance and they make a bunch of noise. You can't handle the sound of somebody blowing their nose behind you. You're tired, you're stressed, you can't focus. All those things take over and we are reading the words on the page, but we're not remembering them, they're not sinking in. So if you read the questions before you do the reading on the test, it's going to help tune out that waste of time voice. Because if I know that it's going to ask me to say, define the word philanthropy, or if I know it's going to ask me a question about where characters are from, right away when I go and start reading, those are things I'm going to circle or make notes on or pay attention to. And it's just going to help me pay a little bit more attention. Number 2, make notes as you read and underline key words. So those could be keywords that you saw maybe in the questions. It could just be that maybe you read a paragraph and it's interesting. It seems like they're giving you lots of information. So maybe you highlight a couple of things or you write on the paragraph, oh, this whole paragraph is about them donating to charity. Making notes is another good way to help you pay attention as you read. And although it might seem like, oh, you know, I have to make sure I manage my time and I don't want to waste time taking notes, it's actually going to save you time. Because then when you go and read the questions and you have to go back to find a specific answer, you just have to read over your notes. You don't have to reread the whole article multiple times. Number 3, read the instructions and the questions carefully. So when you're doing the short answer, reading the instructions is key because they actually give you clues. They say things like respond with a quotation from the story and your own opinion, or they say respond with only your own opinion. So make sure you know what they're asking you. And when you read the questions, pay attention to words like what's the most correct answer or what is not a correct answer. Those are little clues that show you that there's going to be more than one right answer and you have to pick the best one. Number 4, try to say the answer in your head or write it on the side before you look at the choices. This is actually a really good strategy, especially for something like a math multiple choice question, because if you go through and do the work and do the problem solving beforehand, then you'll have an answer. And if that answer is there, it's most likely to be that. Sometimes, you know, there'll be questions that try to trick us and they'll kind of find common mistakes in the things that in the way that we answer a problem. But generally, if you can think of the answer before you read the choices, it's going to help you, again, to kind of pick what's the best one and to not get distracted by what they put in front of you, because there are a lot of multiple choice questions that we call distractors. They're actually there to trick you. So don't let them. You know the answer, be confident, and find the right one. Number 2, process of elimination, cross out the wrong answers. This is a way to, if you're really not sure, if you don't have that background knowledge, generally you can get rid of 2 of the choices pretty easily, and then you just have to decide between the other 2 that are left. Also, though, if they have things like distractors, they'll put an answer that people commonly choose. But if you're crossing out those wrong answers, you won't get thrown off by that. Use the umbrella technique. If, again, you don't have that background knowledge, you've got it down to 2. You know which ones are wrong, but you've got it down to 2 possible choices. Pick the one that can be an umbrella over the other. So probably both are right, but which one is better? Which one could include the other? And then finally, as you're doing the test, if you don't know a question, go ahead and move forward. Don't get stuck. Keep going and try to answer the rest of the questions and then go back. But if you're really low on time and it's coming towards the end of the test, never leave a multiple choice answer blank. And never leave a short answer question blank. There are so many times that we're going through the marks with students from previous years, and they get something like 290 out of 300, which means they're 10 marks away from passing, and it says they left 2 questions blank. That could have been their 10 marks, and that could have been their passing score. So never leave a question blank. So let's try these strategies on 2 sample questions, okay? So we want to convey the idea that people have a choice. We have this incredible technology for the car, but really change has to come from people's mentalities, Whitaker said after meeting with the Student Ecological Club at an Ontario high school. So I just took a little piece of this article. We don't even have the whole thing. So we don't have a lot of context. We don't have a lot of background knowledge for it, but we're going to use our multiple choice strategies to answer this. So what word is closest in meaning to convey as it is used in paragraph 7? This kind of question appears on the test all the time, and this is a background knowledge one. So I'm going to go back to paragraph 7 specifically, which is the only one that I've given you. And I'm going to look at my options. So I've got convey. So I'm going to look for where it appears. We want to convey the idea that people have a choice. Okay, so we want to carry the idea that people have a choice. Can you carry an idea? I'm not so sure. Not really. We want to change the idea that people have a choice. Maybe. Right? We want to change people's minds, and they talk about change coming from people's mentality. So maybe. I'm going to go with maybe. I'm going to cross out carry. We want to continue the idea that people have a choice. No, because they're talking about changing people's ideas, right? And then we want to communicate the idea that people have a choice. Well, that makes sense. When I put it in the sentence, that makes sense. So I've got it down to G and J. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the best answer, what's the closest in meaning. The one that makes the most sense when I put it in the sentence is J. So we're going to communicate the idea that people have a choice. Okay, let's look at the grammar questions. And so again, you might be nervous if grammar isn't your thing, but again, simply doing these multiple choice strategies can get you to the right answer. So it says, choose the sentence that best combines the following sentences. So that's going to tell me that there's probably more than one. There's 3 sentences here. Computers are useful tools. Computers allow students to keep their homework neat. Computers are too expensive for some students. So if I look at option F, computers are useful tools, but they're too expensive for some students. It doesn't have all 3 sentences. It only has 2. So I'm going to get rid of F. Students can keep their homework neat because computers are useful tools. Also doesn't have all 3 sentences. I'm going to get rid of it. So now I'm between H and J. Although they are too expensive for some students, computers are useful tools that allow students to keep their homework neat. Okay, that makes sense. J, computers are useful tools for students, and they allow students to keep their homework neat, and they're too expensive for some students. Okay, so they both have all three sentences, but if I go back to making sure that I read my question carefully, what best combines it? J is not really combining it, they're just listing three different things. Whereas in H, they're showing us cause and effect. They're showing us how things go together. Although they're too expensive for students, they are useful tools and they help students to keep their homework neat. So I'm going to go with H. So that's where you can be thrown off by that best, because they both combine them. But it also shows us how getting rid of these makes my job easier. So that process of elimination, even if I'm not a grammar master, I can reduce some of my work by making it so that I only have to choose between two choices. I've included here some helpful videos that you can watch where some other teachers go through some different strategies on how to do the OSSLT, and this is a teacher going through a specific section of the multiple choice. This is the section where they just talk about multiple choice strategies for any kind of test, and it's only 2 minutes long. It's actually really, really helpful and really visual. And then lastly, I've made you a little video here on how to do a specific piece of the OSSLT through using all of these strategies. So if you want to practice it and try it out, you can follow along with me. Hopefully this will be helpful for the OSSLT as well as your multiple choice tests through the rest of high school. Good luck, everybody.